Hello, and welcome to Arcadia University's University Seminar US 275 Scientific Ethics. I'm John Hoffman, and this video is essentially going to give you a brief overview of Unit 5, and we're going to be taking a look at transplant ethics. Now, essentially the approach taken in transplant ethics is trying to come up with some way in which we can replace damaged cells or damaged organs within the body as a way of treating some type of disease process. And so what we're going to be looking at least initially, in our first lecture, is going to be looking at the concept of organ failure, organ donation, and organ transplantation. And so we're going to talk about some of the factors that are associated with this. Again, from a biological perspective, we're going to talk about why it's important that the donor and the recipient are matched in order to have a successful organ transplantation. We're going to talk about some of the laws and procedures associated with organ donation. And then finally, at least in this first set of lectures, we're going to talk about different organ donation systems. In essence, we have a situation where we have a much greater need for organs than we have a supply. And so we'll talk about some different approaches that can be used to hopefully increase the number of organs available for transplantation. So the discussion topic for this is going to be taking a look at the difference between an opt-in system where somebody volunteers to give their organs and an opt-out system. An opt-out system is where everybody is assumed to be a potential donor unless they make an active decision to refuse, an active decision to say, no, I don't want my organs to be donated once I'm dead. And so what we're going to do is, in the discussion for this topic, is talk about the ethical considerations that are going on and considered between an opt-in and an opt-out organ donation system. The next series of lectures is going to take a look at alternatives to human organ transplants, recognizing that we have a limited number of organs that are available. There are limitations on, even if we have an organ, it has to be a good match with the patient, with the recipient that are getting it. What are some alternatives? And so we're going to look at some cell or tissue donations that can be used instead of organ donation. Blood donation, in essence, is an example of a cell and tissue donation, and take a look at what's going to be going on with that. And then, even if we can't get tissues or cells or organs from human beings, is there potential to obtain animal organs that can be used for transplantation? And so we'll talk about some of the risks and benefits associated with that. And then the discussion topic is to focus in on this idea of what are referred to as xenotransplants, transplants between an animal and a human being. And so we're going to think about, from a scientific perspective, what are some of the risks associated with this? The possibility of obtaining a disease, the possibility of rejecting the organ in relationship to the benefit of, in essence, staying alive, because we now have a functioning organ where we may have had a completely failed organ previously. And so we're going to talk about the ethical approach, the costs and the benefits associated with a xenotransplant, again, a transplant from an animal into a human being. The next lecture topic is going to be taking a look at human transplant concerns. And so looking at some of the decisions and some of the rules, in essence, some of the criteria that are used for determining who it is that gets an organ. How is the decision made that this is going to be the recipient? This is the patient that's going to receive a very rare, very scarce organ. And then we're going to talk about some different possible incentive systems that could be used to increase the supply of organs. So we probably don't want to come up with a system where we're actually going to go through and buy organs, but are there ways in which we can increase the likelihood that individuals are going to be making organ donations? And again, talk about some of the ethical considerations associated with now providing incentives. Now, the discussion topic with this is going to essentially the very extreme of taking a look at financial incentives. essentially looking at the trafficking of human organs. We're looking at whether or not it is or should be permissible for a person that has the means to go through, in essence, buy an organ, to essentially purchase an organ for transplantation. And again, think about this from some of the perspectives that we've already talked about within the course, and then think about it from the perspective, the ethical perspectives of what should and shouldn't be permitted. What are the decisions that should be considered in order to determine the rules or determine the laws that should be in place regarding organ transplantation. And then moving from organ and cell and tissue transplants to take a look at stem cell science. Stem cell science is, again, an idea that you can replace dead or missing or damaged cells within the body with stem cells. So they can be used as a replacement for cells within the body, and they can be used instead of organ or tissue or cell transplants. And so we'll talk about some of the science associated with that. And we'll also talk about the difference between adult stem cells and embryonic stem cells. Again, the scientific approaches for collecting these cells, for using these cells, as well as the ethical considerations and the controversies associated with using stem cell science. One of the major controversies is using embryonic stem cells, and so we're going to have a discussion topic thinking about when does an embryo or a fetus become an individual that has a protected status. This definition of when does human beings or when does human life begin is an incredibly controversial topic in the midst of medical and scientific ethics. And so we need to start to think about this, again, from a perspective of the ethical approach in terms of science, in terms of the laws that are being generated in response to the ethical approaches, the ethical thoughts that are contributing to this. So we'll hopefully have a good discussion about this as we're going through the course. Take a look at stem cell therapy. This idea that once we can better understand stem cells, once we can use them in a safe way, they can be used as replacement cells in the treatment of diseases. Now, at this point in 2012, stem cells can be used within the United States for the treatment of a variety of veterinary disorders. But then we're going to take a look at stem cells in human beings, and so how stem cells are currently being used for treatment of diseases within the United States and abroad. And again, some specific examples associated with that. And then, again, taking a look at this with a discussion topic, saying, okay, we're waiting to better understand the implications of stem cells, what it means to transplant stem cells. Is it safe or not safe to use these stem cells? Should it be possible for individuals that are essentially in a very severe disease state, essentially dying, can they go through and get unapproved stem cell transplants or stem cell treatments? Are they, is it permissible for them to take the risk because there's a potential that they could survive if this stem cell treatment was to work? And so think about some of the ethics involved with that. In general, it's very limited about what a person can do to obtain an unapproved medical treatment, at least within the United States. Should we be looking at relaxing some of these rules under extreme circumstances when an individual is probably or highly likely to die without some type of interaction occurring? And then finally, we'll take a look at stem cell policies. And so we'll take a look at when is it that a medical procedure is going to be covered insurance. We're going to take a look at this from a perspective of stem cells, but it's related to experimental treatments of all types. When is it that it's approved for either Medicare or for insurance? We'll talk about some of the laws and regulations and guidelines for the development and research of embryonic stem cells. And then finally, we'll talk about the regulatory mechanisms that are in place that are controlling the use of human stem cells for the treatment of human diseases. And again, the example of this, kind of following up with what we had on our previous discussion, is taking a look at, okay, what is it that the Food and Drug Administration should be doing in determining whether or not these stem cells, these biological cells, can be used for the treatment of diseases. How closely do the stem cells and these cells relate to, say, a new drug treatment or some other type of new treatment that needs to be approved by the FDA prior to being used widespread in the treatment of human diseases. And so, again, we'll talk about this from both the scientific perspective, from the legal perspective, and then talk about the ethics that are involved with this. Again, the different philosophies that are contributing to the controversies associated with this. And that's going to end our series of lectures on transplant ethics. Again, as a way in which we can look at the treatment of human diseases. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hoffmanj@arcadia.edu. Thank you.